President Biden issued stern warning about future of the nation's democracy. Former NYPD officer sentenced to 10 years in prison for assaulting a police officer on January 6th. U.S. life expectancy dropped in 2021 for a second consecutive year. 1 killed, more than 100 injured in opposition party police clash in Bangladesh. Iran using surveillance cameras to identify woman breaking hijab rule. From our Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Saamiyah Syed. Our top story tonight. On Thursday, President Joe Biden said America's democratic values are under assault by forces of extremism loyal to former President Donald J. Trump. In a primetime address, Biden issued a stern warning about the future of the nation's democracy. He called the campaign against Trump-led extremism the battle for the soul of the nation. Biden said equality and democracy are under assault.
For a long time, we've told ourselves that American democracy is guaranteed, but it's not. We have to defend it, protect it, stand up for it, each and every one of us. That's why tonight, I'm asking our nation to come together, unite behind the single purpose of defending our democracy regardless of your ideology.
He gave the speech outside Independence Hall in Philadelphia, where the Declaration of Independence was approved in July 1776. It is also the site where the founders wrote the Constitution in the summer of 1787. Former New York City police officer Thomas Webster was sentenced to 10 years in prison for assaulting a police officer on January 6, 2021. Webster unsuccessfully tried to convince a Washington, D.C. jury that he was merely acting in self-defense. It is the longest sentence levied against any defendant accused of involvement in the January 6th Capitol riot. In videos played during the trial, Webster, a 56-year-old former Marine, can be seen swinging a metal flagpole at D.C. officer Noah Rathbun. He then crossed police barriers and tackled Rathbun, choking him with the officer's chin strap. In May, Webster was found guilty of all 6 charges, 5 of which are felonies. U.S. life expectancy dropped for the second consecutive year in 2021, falling by nearly a year from 2020, according to a new report based on provisional data. In the first 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic, the estimated U.S. lifespan shortened by nearly 3 years. The last time a similar decrease happened was in early 1940s at the height of World War II. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention blamed COVID for half of the decline in 2021. That's when vaccinations became widely available, but new coronavirus variants caused waves of hospitalizations and deaths. Other health concerns such as drug overdoses, heart disease, suicide, and chronic liver disease contributed to the decline. A University of Miami team is working on a project to better understand and address the gaps in mental health care for Muslim Americans. Psychology professor Amy Wiseman Dimamani and graduate students Salman Shaheen Ahmed and Miranda McLaughlin are collaborating on the project. Ahmed's family member was beaten at his Washington, D.C. area high school because he was Muslim. Ahmed said he has become accustomed to airport security scrutinizing him more thoroughly than others because of his name and beard. McLaughlin's close Muslim friend who wears a head covering was called a terrorist in Spanish while shopping in Miami. Research shows Muslim Americans have higher rates of depression and anxiety than other minority groups. They may also be 2 times more likely to attempt suicide than other religious groups. The new U.S. ambassador to Sudan, John Godfrey, reiterated his country's support for the Sudanese people's desire for a democratic transition under civilian leadership. Godfrey said in a video message posted by the U.S. Embassy in Khartoum that it is time to establish a credible civilian government. It's an important step that will help Sudan emerge from political and economic crisis, he said. Godfrey is the first U.S. ambassador to Sudan in nearly 25 years. He said Washington encourages all actors to participate in a comprehensive dialogue to establish a new civilian government and restore democratic transition. News on the clash between the opposition party and police in Bangladesh comes with details after the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. An activist from Bangladesh's main opposition political party was killed and nearly 100 others were injured during a clash with police. The incident occurred in the country's central industrial area of Narayanganj, according to local and official sources. It broke out when activists from the Bangladesh Nationalist Party were holding a rally commemorating the party's 44th anniversary. Opposition leaders claimed police deliberately attacked their peaceful march. The roughly 100 people injured were taken to several local hospitals and healthcare facilities. BNP Secretary General Mirza Fakhrul Islam Alamgir condemned the incident and demanded those responsible be punished. An Iranian official says footage from surveillance cameras in public places will be used to help identify and fine women who fail to adhere to the mandatory hijab rule. Mohammad Saleh Hashemi Golpayagani posted a video on social media saying the measure is based on the July 5th order by President Ibrahim Raisi to enforce the hijab and chastity law. It is the first time an Iranian official has publicly admitted to the use of facial recognition technology in surveillance. Golpayagani is the secretary of Iran's headquarters for enjoining right and forbidding evil. He previously has said women who publish their pictures without a hijab on the internet will be deprived of some rights for 6 months to a year. A UN-chartered ship loaded with Ukrainian wheat destined for millions at risk of starvation in Ethiopia arrived in Djibouti. The UN's World Food Programme said the bulk carrier delivered 23,000 tons of grain docked in the Horn of Africa port city. The ship left a Black Sea port in Ukraine 2 weeks ago. The UN agency said food insecurity and malnutrition are a major concern across Ethiopia. An estimated 20.4 million people are in need of food support. Ukraine is one of the world's largest grain supporters. It was forced to halt nearly all deliveries after Russia's invasion in February, raising fears of a global food crisis. Afghanistan received another $40 million in humanitarian cash aid, the nation's central bank said. According to the Afghanistan Bank, the money arrived Monday from donor countries to help the people of the country. The war-ravaged nation is facing a humanitarian crisis after the exit of foreign forces in August last year and the fall of the US-backed Kabul administration. It resulted in the Taliban regaining power after 20 years of conflict. This is the third injection of international aid in a month. Afghanistan received $80 million in 2 separate rounds. The bank also urged the international community to interact and cooperate with Afghanistan in other areas to help its people. Islamic finance holds several unique attributes around debt, ownership, and the types of assets or trading vehicles allowed or prohibited. That's according to Ibrahim Khan, co-founder of the UK-based Islamic finance guru, which guides Muslims on issues relating to investments and personal finance. In an interview with Kitco News on Tuesday, Khan said interest and excessive uncertainty in transactions are not allowed in Islamic finance. He noted that the system has prescriptions against interest, gambling, and immoral activities. Therefore, Muslims must think carefully and structure loans in such a way that works under that system. In Islamic finance, loans with interest are considered haram or forbidden. Islamic loans are instead structured as equity contracts. There would then be rental payments instead of interest payments. Khan said there's never been a pure Islamic economy since the decoupling of gold from currency. Coming up after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. Muslim Network TV collaborated with Burma Task Force to organize a program on Labor Day. Let's take a look.
We are very aware of the 100 million displaced people in the world. When we ask this Labor Day, who is left behind, we know that many of this 100 million people are not being helped. The Labor Day holiday was instituted not simply as a long weekend, but as a way to celebrate the value of labor in the late 19th century in the United States. In Europe and other countries, it's May Day. Similar idea, the rights of workers, the value of work. However, refugees, unfortunately, are often denied the right to work and are forced to work under the table, if even that. So we're going to talk a bit about that today. A serious subject, but perhaps one that can inform our enjoyment of the holiday in a meaningful way.
We know that in many cases, there are barriers that really obstruct people's ability to access livelihood opportunities. And we also know that in most refugee situations, people are stuck in long-term scenarios where their rights are severely curtailed, including freedom of movement and the right to work, both of which are essential to accessing the labor market. It's not just organizations like our NGOs and those who, do advocacy who need to be working on this. There really needs to be a multi-tiered effort to improve refugee access to their rights. And so that can include, as Bahati mentioned, some of the different big actors like financing institutions like the World Bank that are taking increasingly active roles in this space that had largely been just the traditional humanitarian actors for a long time. It includes the private sector that we've been working hard to engage, meeting with companies and others who work in the business sector. How can they take more responsibility in hiring refugees and helping them, training them, accessing their skills and experiences that they already bring, and improving their access to education so they can access the labor market. Perhaps banks, right? And depending on the country, it includes, can refugees get a small business loan to open up a shop or to carry out some of the work that they've done?
I remember for so many years, I've been a refugee for 23 years. And these are some of the issues most organizations we are really trying to make sure that we address. As a refugee, as a young man, as a refugee in Uganda, I remember a scenario where my late father, after harvesting corn with fellow farmers in my refugee camp, in my former refugee camp in Uganda, put together their corn. A season takes 6 months from planting to harvesting. And what happened was they wanted to put together their corn so that at least they sell them together so that they are not cheated individually. So they wanted to have that bargaining power. So they had to go through a middleman, a businessman, a Ugandan who was supposed to connect them to the market. Unfortunately, the middleman had to take every single coin from the sale. And my father, his friends, his friend farmers from the refugee camp did not get any single money from the refugee camp, from the sale. And this is a challenge where refugees are not protected by the law. They could not sue, they could not go to the police because most times, as we are going to talk about, there are no laws, there are no frameworks that allow refugees to be able to exercise their rights and access justice. So I think there are so many cases out there, so many refugees who face these challenges. They cannot sue, they cannot claim for their fair pay, they cannot be able to move from around the refugee camp to sell their produce outside the refugee camp because there are these encampment policies that do not allow refugees to move freely. And these are the issues we are speaking about in this report.
I think what we find overall is that 55% of refugees live in countries that restrict their access to work. And at least 19% live in countries that severely restrict this access to work. So we are seeing a situation in a world panoramic that refugees themselves, they cannot find possibilities to work in practice. And it's important to differentiate the two situations we have. We have the law, what the law dictates, and also the practical side. And the practical side, the law might say you are allowed to work or you might not be allowed to work, and that's one aspect of it. But then the other story is in practice, can refugees work even in informal sectors? And in some countries they can, but in some others we see a continuation of restrictions, such as the example that we were hearing before of the story of Bangladesh, where even informal work of people trying to get by through maybe opening a shop, even within the camp, or as a day laborer outside the camp, working in agriculture or any other job that they can get to get by, these rights and that possibility to even get informal job is even curtailed. We have other examples. For instance, a positive example we can see in Jordan, where the country originally did not legally allow refugees to work. And then with the Jordan Compact, we saw some improvement in the legal framework that allowed refugees to work in some sectors of the economy. And while this law was not perfect, it didn't allow all refugees to work freely and really join the labor market. We can see some positive outcomes of these permits, and now all the sectors have been unrestricted, and we see Syrian refugees being able to find employment and join the labor market more easily than if they didn't have these permits. Another example, and I think we talked about it before, was also the case of Malaysia, where even informal work, refugees can have access to informal work. They're legally not allowed to work. They're not even recognized as refugees. And in Malaysia, what we see is also that even in informal work, there's detentions, there's harassment, and informality for refugees that are not recognized also leads to a lot of exploitation and abuse. So we've seen some cases of employers retaining the salaries or just not paying people for their work just because they know that they don't have any legal protections to ensure that their rights and the rights as workers and their rights as individuals are protected. So it's really a situation that varies from country to country. And sometimes while informality allows an avenue for refugees to work, in informality we can also see a lot of exploitation and abuse, especially when the government does not recognize refugee status and refugees.
So this covers the countries that we've looked at, and we tried to come up with rankings that help describe people's access to the labor market according to, again, de jure, what's written on paper in the law versus de facto. And so you can see we took into account various factors. We did both a literature review and we spoke to as many people as we could with a survey to help determine these rankings. As you can see, it's not divided by income level. Some wealthier countries and some lower income countries, there's a lot of variance between the countries. And it really helps us give a sense of how well refugees, in some cases, other displaced groups, are able to access the labor market. As Martha touched on, this disparity between de jure and de facto is a key feature of the report, but informality is another important aspect. In many of these countries, people are working informally, meaning not in the formal sector with a work permit, et cetera. And that's quite common among the host community as well. Maybe this is particularly common in the agricultural sector. Certainly, we see this across many refugee hosting countries, that the host community and refugees are both working informally. In some cases, this is common and works well. In other cases, as Martha said, this leaves them open to exploitation and abuse. So that's a really important aspect. Documentation does matter. Again, at the policy level, though, states really do need to get legislation passed that both embraces what we know is outlined in the international legal norms, the rights and treaties that many sign on to, including the Refugee Convention and other human rights documents, but it needs to be enshrined in domestic law as well so that it's carried out. And what we have found is that it's really critical, even if something is passed at the national level, like we're seeing in Kenya right now. There was major legislation passed last year, but how it's carried out on the local level. Do local officials understand it and know about it? And how are they carrying it out is where it really is important for the lives of refugees. I think states can also pressure other states, so countries that are more open to refugee access to the labor market can encourage other states, perhaps through leveraging other types of economic interests to encourage them to improve their policies, and in many cases respect what they have already put down in their international and national legal documents. So
I think an important topic that we've all touched upon is attitudes, right? What is the public opinion, and how me as a citizen of a country support refugees? And normally we do this through our votes, right? Do we vote for a candidate that really uses migrants and uses refugees as scapegoats to pass laws and blame them because of the economy, because of COVID? And I think that we see this increasing narrative that it is the fault of refugees, that it is the fault of migrants, that jobs are not available, that the COVID pandemic is spreading. And that is not the reality. The reality is that when we see displaced people like refugees in a host country, they're not there to take the jobs of locals. On the contrary, if evidence shows in so many contexts, like there was a study on Malaysia, we had a study on Colombia, in Peru, in so many contexts where it shows that refugees add to the economy, and it shows that refugee integration and allowing refugees to work actually will create more jobs, will create more fiscal gains and fiscal revenue for the host country, will uplift the overall economy. So it will increase more opportunities for all. And by actually leaving refugees outside the labor market, countries are incurring in cost because these refugees need to depend on aid to survive because they cannot be self-reliant. So expanding labor market access, allowing refugees to become self-reliant, allowing refugees to work, not only will allow them to have a better life, to provide for their families, to thrive, but also will allow them to contribute to their host communities. We have refugees that are doctors that come with skills, and normally these skills are not transferable. When they are displaced, they cannot use their professional credentials to work in their professions in their host country, or if they had a special skill in their country of origin, normally those skills are not transferred for them to work in the same profession once they get to the new country. And we see this in most of the countries of the study. If I think in all of the countries of the study, we see this case where refugees are not able to transfer the skills and knowledge. And I think like this is so important. And one of the best ways that we can start taking action is by really getting educated and and really talking with like refugee and displaced communities to understand what they go through and see them as human, because ultimately they're not our enemy. They're not here to take away from our pie. They're here to make the pie larger.
Our faith is not only aligned with establishing and fighting for immigrant and refugee rights, but it calls upon us to affirmatively do so. So interestingly enough, people tend to overlook the fact that the Prophet ﷺ himself immigrated from Mecca to Medina. And it's mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-Hashr that Allah is giving reverence to the people of Medina for accepting the migrants from Mecca who were suffering from persecution and suffering from, the government there was had a boycott on them for many years. And we see this today in countries all over the world. And instead of turning them away, instead of saying, you're going to take our jobs, you're going to take our livelihood, the people of Medina accepted the people of Mecca with open arms. And not only accepted them, but gave them equal of what they had. These specifics are mentioned in the Quran. And so we as Muslims have to take ownership of our responsibility and our honor to give what we have to those who are being persecuted or suffering in their own home country.
That's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.